Hey friends, it's Alexander Williamson here with The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. Today we're going to be talking about CO2 and setting up a CO2 system for your aquarium. What are the true costs? What's all the equipment you need, and what do you need to get going? What are the brands that I would recommend, and what are the brands that I'm using right now after about a decade now of experience around them? And you have a lot to choose from these days, and honestly there's a lot of entry-level products that do pretty well. There's also a lot of middle-of-the-road products that are very good, as good as the stuff that was $500 or $600 you can get for $100, $150 now. So I want to go over some of that, show you guys the actual gear you're going to need if you want to set up CO2. And in this video, we're not going to be going over how to use the CO2 or any of that. You can check out some of my other videos for that. But I also want to do a review of 1 year using the FZONE Pro Series modular CO2 manifold and regulator system. So I'm very happy with it, just to start off. So let's get into looking at that and my other systems and see what it really costs to run CO2. Alright everybody, let's go over all the components you're gonna need if you're buying a CO2 setup just to get going. So you're going to need your regulator. Your regulator is this thing, and it usually includes the manifold. Now the manifold will usually come with 1, sometimes 2 bubble counters and bubble chambers, and then lines running off of it. It usually will not come with the line. Some will and some won't come with a solenoid. Now your solenoid turns on and off your manifold section of your CO2. So this solenoid plugs in to a timer power strip, and it will turn on with your lights that way, or a little before, a little after, whatever you set it to. And this allows you to set it and forget it. You don't need to manually do things every day, turning them on and off and adjusting the flow rates and things if you have a good solenoid on your manifold of your regulator. I know that sounded like a lot if you're new to this, but moving to the regulator, on the regulator, this is going to control your high pressure out of a tank. Now this is a 20-pound tank. This has lasted me a year in this room, in this nursery tank here, or community tank, whatever you want to call it, that's 50 gallons plus, and this one that's 25 gallons plus. Sorry, boy, you can see it's dirty from this angle, but this is a shrimp and nursery tank here with a few little killifish in it too. So I run CO2 in here, but I haven't been running CO2 in here for a while, to be honest. But it's been over a year since I've had to replace the canister. And speaking of, none of your regulators, whether you buy them from a kit online, unless it says it comes with the tank, it's not going to come with the canister, aka tank. So these tanks, brand new, they can be a few $100s. But I have a little trick for you on a few things that we're going to go over, but one major one is, if you're not concerned about what it looks like, you'll still get the same exact performance out of it. But some of these look like, you know, a stainless steel that's brushed and perfect. Some of them look like they're enamel coated, and they look like something out of Clockwork Orange or Star Trek or something. You can get very nice ones like EDER and all sorts of different European brands and things that look very sleek to go with a rimless tank, assuming that you're going to have the tank on the outside. But if you have a stand or a place or cabinets to put your tank in, then in the US anyways, you can go and get a used tank. So find a tank. I got this one for under $50 years ago, and the actual trick is I didn't get this one. Every time I go to a place in Seattle called Central Weld, and there's different weld shops all over America, but most of them will say, okay, you've got your tank, you want to refill it, what gas do you want? So you're going to want to buy a tank that had either CO2, oxygen, or nitrous oxide or nitrogen in it. You don't want something that had fuel in it or anything harmful, obviously. Xenon's probably fine too, but you probably won't encounter that. But regardless of all that, you're going to have a certification on it. And a lot of times people will sell expired tanks online thinking that the safety expiration date is no good. And what that is it's a test. It's called the static test. And usually it's $20 to $40, depending on the place and the size of the tank. And it's testing how good the valves are. On this tank, you can see that this is old. Look at the rubber band. It's actually like brittle and rotten. That's like wrapped up on the top here from whoever used it 5 years ago. And when you go in, if you have a used tank, they're going to give you a whole new tank every time, but they're going to re-static test it, so you're going to know that it's safe and meets the requirements in your state, as long as it's a reputable dealership. However, they won't make you pay the fee if you're trading it in. So if you buy your own nice fancy one and you want it refilled, one, you have to find a place with giant CO2 tanks that refills your CO2 and doesn't just do drop off and delivery, just like propane kind of, where you just go bring your old tank and get a new one. If you get an old dingy tank, you can do the propane tank deal where you bring your tank in, hand it to them, and for this one, I think they charge $26. I've got a year of CO2 for my entire aquarium. So it's really the initial setup that's going to cost the money. So let's continue down the system of what else you need. So you got your tank. This one cost me $50, then 20 to fill up. There's 70. Give or take, you could spend up to $500 or $600 if you want a really sleek one that's, baby blue and enamel coated and 10 pounds rather than this 20 pounds, and it's all up to date and sealed. And you may need to static test it every 2 years or every 3 years or every year, depending on your state and the gas that you're using. So then over here, I really have enjoyed this the last year too, which is the FZONE Plus regulator system and manifold system. It came with both of these. I haven't been using this one, so the water's evaporated out a bit just because I don't have a check valve on the line. Which brings me to my next conversation, which is when you get a CO2 regulator, another cost that they don't tell you about that you're going to have to spend eventually is you're going to need to buy little check valves. Now you can get them as cheap as $2.50, $1 a piece if you want little plastic ones like these, or you can get a better quality stainless steel one that's going to last you a lot longer. But they go somewhere along the line. Now this line is also not the same line as your airline, or at least it shouldn't be, because over time CO2 will make airline brittle. It will crack, and not to mention that CO2 line that's designed for CO2 won't explode under pressure, whereas your airlines for your aquarium room, they are not designed to hold the pressure, and they will actually pop if it too suddenly, if you were to say crank up the pressure like that. So that's also a sign of quality, is if your airline holds, your check valve holds. Now cheap check valves will also pop off too, so that's why you might not want to buy the $1 check valve. You might want to buy a $5 or $10 check valve and have one that lasts a while. And you can put the check valve anywhere on this line, and in some setups like this one here, you can actually get a special connection point that has a check valve right at the top of the bubble counter, which is really nice. Now also, a lot of systems, like I think Aquarium Co-op system, it's like $119 for this, the solenoid that turns everything off and on with the electronics in your tank every day, and then I think you get one bubble counter. The Aquarium Co-op one, you can spend another $20 and get another bubble counter, but then you're going to need to spend another 10, 15, 20, whatever, however much hose you need somewhere between 10 and 20 bucks, you're going to need to spend that on pressurized hose and another $5 to $10 check valve. So you're thinking you're going to be spending another $30 to $50 per tank you want to add on, if it's even modular. So that's why you want to make sure that it's modular, and you want to make sure that it's a good quality build. So things like the threading on the adjustment sections, it's really nice to have this cross threading, because a lot of times in the fish room your hands are wet and you want to adjust something and you just can't get a grip on it, or you want to undo the CO2 line and clean it out, or switch something out, add a longer line, whatever it may be. And this top piece here on these, and on a lot of them these days, you're able to break it all down. So you can unscrew this top piece here, and this piece, and this piece, and you can unscrew it from here, and this can unscrew from here. So you can take this all apart and clean out all of this in case algae starts to grow, or if you have hard water, sometimes you'll see like a build up in here. But I try to use distilled water in here so you don't get the water stains in the check valve. So you just carry a little, water bottle size, like 12 to 16 ounces of distilled water or drinking water from a bottled water. Leave that under your aquarium and you'll probably never need to buy another one. Now, the other thing you want to consider when buying this is going to be the actual setup for how your gas is coming out. And you can do a lot of different things. Now, a lot of people also want the little chemical solution that tells you when you have too much CO2 in your tank, when the CO2 has saturated your tank and your fish are in danger. So you can get another kit for another 10 to 20 bucks that has a chemical in it, and it will sit on the side of your tank, a little piece of plastic or glass, depending on, you can spend 100 bucks on it if you want, but it'll tell you where the dangerous point is. However, if you have a super planted tank and you're never really pushing CO2 more than 2 or 3 bubbles a second, and good lighting for your plants to metabolize that CO2 and good flow for it to move around, you don't really need that CO2 checker unless you're brand new and you just really want that reassurance. Let's go look at my other CO2 setup just so I can show you a few other kinds, but I'll show you another setup here, and this one is a very similar style to that Neo one. And you can see that we've got CO2 turned on just right now. And this one right here, it can be very, very slow. So when you have pressure in the tank and pressure in the water in your whole line, so as soon as I bring it out, the bubbles will probably flow freer because the stone is actually porous. So there's different things to consider once you really get into it there, and also what you want it to look like. How much do you want it to be seen or not seen? How small do you want the bubbles? Because at the end of the day, what you want to get good CO2 dissolving in your tank is you want as many tiny bubbles as you can get coming to the surface as quick as you can. And then when they reach the surface is when the CO2 actually mixes with your water. Now, it's just like a cavitation bubble. If you've ever seen a bubble underwater where it pops underwater like a gas bubble from something moving fast like a ship propeller or prop, you'll see that the space, a void is made, and then it collapses in, and sometimes it even makes a flash of light. There's that much energy. But the point is that there's a lot of energy when these bubbles collapse, and you want them to stay as small as possible so that they're always collapsing and mixing the gas at the surface, because it's only at the surface that the bubbles mix. And same with your oxygen in your tank leaving your tank. your gas can come up and it can travel as a bubble, but the surface tension of the water is going to try to hold it in the water, and it's not until that bubble pops that it's either going to diffuse into the water or escape into the atmosphere. And it's doing a little bit of both with this setup. So that's kind of the compromise that CO2 systems have set up. So let's go over this again. You could spend as low as $10 or $15 on a stone or a diffuser in your tank. Aquarium Co-op or Fluval sells these kind of things. Then you're going to want to spend 10 or 20 bucks on your line, 5 or 10 bucks probably in reality on check valve, or you want to buy a setup that has a check valve built in. And then if you want more than one system, you're going to have to double all those costs or triple it if you want 3. So then you're going to need to spend somewhere between $20 and $50 per extra bubble section you want. And that's only if your chamber, your manifold, allows expansion, which the FZONE allows, I believe, up to 5 or 6 it can handle, whereas Aquarium Co-op I think can handle 4 or 5. You'll have to double check that, but I'm kind of using Aquarium Co-op as a general standard for a lot of folks, because I know a lot of you have heard of that. Now in the description I will link to this one, which is a little cheaper than the Aquarium Co-op one at the end of the day, with the gear. But they're very comparable, definitely. And you just want to see what's included, because even if you get this and the manifolds and the extra manifold, you kind of have to add all that up. Now this kit, the FZONE Plus, comes with 2 of the bubble counters, the manifold, the solenoid that turns it on and off, the high pressure and low pressure gauge, and the fine tuning gauges, and all these gauges. So that's all it comes with. You're always going to have to buy this and the diffuser and the CO2 detector if you want that, the chemical one, and then your tank and your timer on your other things. Now you can use any timer, so that's fine. Let's take a look at one more setup, a smaller setup, because this is a big old setup. So let me show you what some of my other setups look like. So here is what another smaller setup, a 2.5 pound tank, would look like. And look how clean this tank is. They just happened to give me a really nice clean tank with an enamel coat on the top, nice brass still. And then this is a smaller setup. So this is like a $50 solenoid and regulator and bubble counter. Doesn't have a manifold. You can only put one bubble counter on it. And right now, because of the humidity in here, this thing's full. So we'll actually have to purge it and slowly turn it on if we want to clear it. You can see we've still got over 1,000 or almost 1,000 pounds in the high pressure point. So you always want the high pressure to tell you how much is in the tank, and then the low pressure, because you're going to want somewhere between 75 and 50 psi to be running up your line and into your aquarium. And if we turn this, you'll see this is the control valve for this one. Now on this same style one, you can see how closely this looks like the other one. You could literally use these parts interchangeably, and that's because so many of them are mass produced in China. I've had this one for over 6 years now, and if you look at it, you can see it's corroded a little bit, but I have pretty soft water, so it hasn't rusted, and the water stains are very minimal, even though there is a little bit there. But that's after being in a fish room for 5 or 6 years, and honestly never cleaning it really. Also, this line is still just as sturdy and good as the day I bought it, and the check valve's fine. Now let me find you guys an example here of, out of my little secret gear thing, let me find you guys an example of, so you've got your extra tubing that's going to come just like airline tubing, and then you've got also your different diffuser setups you can buy, and you can go from owning hand-blown glass, or I've even seen people run things as silly as single valve, like the FluVol little nano kit, and it only has the high pressure gauge, and that's why it's so hard to control. So the more money you spend on this, and the heavier and chunkier this is, like the other one in the other room has the big manifold that comes out, that allows you finer control and more sections. Whereas if you just need one, yeah, you could spend 50 or 60 bucks, but you're only going to have the one ever. And your control over it is going to be kind of like, oh, that's going pretty quick, or you can slow it down a bit, but it's really hard to get it to go to nothing. Like, watch, it'll just stop in a sec. So it's harder to control when you don't have a good needle valve and a good big and small valve that are very accurately machined. This is the one that used to come with the nano size FluVol, and I wouldn't recommend the mini CO2 kits. This one, literally, you just unscrew up here on this nut, and you're supposed to be able to control the 50 PSI mark somewhere in there, even though it goes all the way up to the high PSI. So that's just silliness. But what's not silliness is this air stone that they make that comes with that. And you can buy these separate online or at PetSmart, Petco, with the miniature FluVol nano size tanks. And these are usually somewhere between $7.99 and $12.99. And they work really well for a long time as a good diffuser. They don't lock in, or they don't lock in for real high pressure, so you might get some leaking after a while, but they work well for about 6 months to a year, and at that price you can't really beat it. They work really well in this tank for me. Right now I've got the light just in a factory mode, but so you have your options of what you want to do, and there's a lot of different kits that are going to look like this for right around 50 bucks online on Amazon. A lot of them are okay, but some of them aren't. And do you really want to risk not knowing which is which, and some small company going out of business, they slap a different sticker on this part every time? And it turns out that the same company that does the nicer ones is who FZONE and Higer, a lot of different companies, work with. The same is true of check valves. You can get a check valve as simple as this, that's 50 cents, or you can spend 5 to 10 bucks and never worry about it. It's not going to crack, it's not going to break in the line, and it's not going to leak or anything. And you can get a nicer check valve. But I just wanted to show you, you saw the ones in the other room that were $2.50. This is one that's 50 cents for a check valve. And it stops the water from coming back down the line, or air from going back up the, and it only allows air to go one way up the line, rather. Allows anything to go one way and not the other. So all these things are things to consider. These smaller tanks are a lot of times a lot cheaper to get than the big 20-pound or 10-pound tanks. This is a 2.5, like I said. But if you're going to use a paintball size tank, that's its own custom deal, and you need to be aware of, you need to buy a whole different setup because it connects differently than this standard size thing. And you're going to need an adjustable monkey wrench probably to be able to get in here and move this. Now if it's a cheaper setup, you're going to bang it, and it could even start cracking like this one. This is one of those no-name brand ones that I've had for 6 years, and it's held up, it's still working. But on the higher end stuff, on the machined aircraft grade aluminum type stuff like that FZONE, I'm sure an Aquarium Co-op has sourced theirs for very similar quality. You're not going to run into near as many problems, or corrosion and things like that. Again, this solenoid on this type, it's very similar, almost the same. There is very little variation on a lot of the parts. A lot of times you'll even see that the dial is the only thing that's different. Like they put a decal in the center, or on here they slapped a sticker on, and that's the only difference. So look through and make sure that they're not just taking these, and you'll see online on Amazon, oh, this one's purple, or this one's, you know, blue, and this blue and silver, and this one's black. Well, they just electrostatically plate or coat the metal, and they just are all buying it from the same cheap place. They add $2 to the cost of their end, and then they charge an extra 20 or 30 bucks to say that it's some nicer pro version or whatever. So I can safely say, after using the FZONE out in the other room for several years, I really like that one. The Aquarium Co-op one seems pretty good too. I was able to get the FZONE a bit cheaper when all was said and done, and also when I ordered it, I was able to order it on Amazon, get this heavy tubing, the check valves, and I could decide which diffuser I wanted rather than only having the one brand choice of the Neo. But the Neo is a fine choice. So I think whether you go with Aquarium Co-op, whether you go with UNS, or whether you go with FZONE, those are all great choices for first ones. I'm going to put affiliate links in the description if you want this exact same setup. Your job will be sourcing the tank and deciding what size tank you want. So that's really the rundown. What I've always used in all of these tanks is some variation of these. So if you guys enjoyed this, thumbs up. If you want to know more about CO2 and things, let me know. I just hadn't done anything in a long time on them, and I wanted to review that FZONE because it's been exactly a year, I noticed, and it's working great for me. I really do like it, and it's only $139.99 when I got it, and they didn't give it to me, or, you know, they didn't pay me, they didn't give me anything for it. I just bought it, and I'm reviewing it. So yeah, it's not sponsored. This isn't a sponsored video or anything, nor did Aquarium Co-op or anything like that. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and you figure out what you need with CO2, and I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks so much.